You probably know someone who lies constantly. Not about big things necessarily, maybe it's small distortions, tiny edits to a story that make them look a little better, versions of events that somehow always place them at the center and always make them right. And if you've ever tried to point this out, you know how that ends. They don't get defensive, they don't panic, they just look at you like you're the one who's confused. Here's what's strange. Most of them aren't doing it on purpose. Dostoevsky spent his entire career studying this exact type of person, not the calculating liar, but the one who genuinely believes their own distortions. And what he found is more unsettling than any simple dishonesty. He found that the most dangerous lies aren't the ones we tell other people. They're the ones we tell ourselves and can no longer distinguish from the truth. Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote in 19th century Russia under censorship after surviving a mock execution after years in a Siberian labor camp. He had every reason to write simple morality tales. Good versus evil, heroes and villains. Instead, he did something that made him essential. He made his characters psychologically real. His people aren't good or bad, they're convinced, and that conviction, that absolute certainty that they are right, that their suffering is unique, that their choices are justified, is the engine behind almost everything they do. In the Brothers Karamazov, one of the most psychologically dense novels ever written, there's a character named Fyodor Pavlovich, the father. He's selfish, manipulative, and profoundly shameless. But what makes him fascinating isn't his cruelty. It's that he seems entirely unbothered by it, because in his own mind, it barely exists. Dostoevsky doesn't present this as evil, he presents it as a mechanism, a very human one. Modern psychology has a term for what Dostoevsky was describing, self-deception. But that word makes it sound almost accidental, like a small glitch. What Dostoevsky was pointing at is something far more structural. He believed that the human mind has a nearly unlimited capacity to construct narratives, and that once a person begins building a narrative that protects their self-image, that narrative becomes almost impossible to dismantle from the outside. Think about how this works in real life. Someone does something genuinely hurtful. Maybe they cancel on a friend for the 5th time. Maybe they say something cutting in a meeting. And almost immediately, not after reflection, but immediately, they begin narrating. Now, I've been under so much pressure lately. They've been sensitive about everything recently. It wasn't the right moment anyway. Each of these is plausible. That's what makes them so effective. The self-deceiving mind doesn't generate absurd defenses, it generates reasonable ones, ones that can't quite be refuted, ones that slide into place so smoothly that within hours, the person isn't defending themselves anymore. They genuinely don't remember the event the way it happened. Dostoevsky called this process something closer to self-intoxication. In The Brothers Karamazov, the character Ivan makes a brutal observation that humans are capable of feeling sincere emotion about things they've entirely fabricated. We don't just lie and then feel guilty. We lie, believe the lie, and then feel moved by our own sincerity. There's a moment in the novel where a character weeps during a conversation, genuinely weeps over a version of events that is almost entirely invented. And Dostoevsky doesn't frame this as hypocrisy. He frames it as something worse, as a kind of tragedy, because the person has lost access to themselves. This is where Dostoevsky diverges from what we might expect. He doesn't condemn these characters. He tracks them the way a scientist tracks a natural process, not a moral one. And what he finds consistently is this: the more intelligent the person, the more sophisticated the rationalization. It's not the dim or the simple who construct the most elaborate self-justifications. It's the articulate ones, the ones who can build a case, the ones who, given enough internal architecture, can make almost anything sound reasonable. This is where it gets personal, because Dostoevsky wasn't writing about other people, he was writing about the reader, about the voice inside that narrates your life, the one that edits, softens, and reframes events until they form a story you can live with. And here's the question he forces us to ask: how much of what you believe about yourself is actually true? And how much is a story you've told so many times it feels like memory? Most people, when they think about self-deception, think about someone else, a politician, an ex-partner, a difficult family member. Dostoevsky's point is that this is itself the mechanism. The moment you locate self-deception entirely in other people is the moment you've made yourself immune to examining it in yourself. The people in his novels who suffer the most aren't the ones who lie to others. They're the ones who have become so skilled at lying to themselves that they've lost the thread back to what they actually feel, what they actually want, what they actually did. So what does any of this mean practically? Dostoevsky doesn't offer prescriptions. That's not what literature is for. But embedded in his work is something more useful than advice. It's a method of observation. He teaches you to notice the speed of self-justification. In his characters, the rationalization always arrives too fast. Before the dust settles, before there's been any real reflection, the narrative is already in place. If you're paying attention to your own mind, that speed is the signal, the thought that appears immediately after you do something uncomfortable, the one that makes it okay or inevitable or someone else's fault. That thought deserves a second look. Not punishment, not shame, just a second look. There's also something he returns to across his work that functions almost as an antidote: witness. Characters who can see themselves clearly, not who are perfect, but who can hold themselves with some distance, some honesty, are the only ones in his novels who don't destroy themselves. That capacity to observe yourself the way you'd observe a character in a novel, with curiosity rather than verdict, is probably the closest thing Dostoevsky offers to psychological health. Not certainty about who you are, not a polished self-image, just the willingness to keep looking. Dostoevsky spent decades mapping the interior life of people who had, in various ways, lost contact with reality. Not through madness, but through the very ordinary human habit of preferring a comfortable version of events to an accurate one. What makes his work last isn't the drama, it's the precision. He understood something that took psychology another century to formalize, that the self is not a fixed thing we discover, but a story we're always in the middle of writing. And that the most important question isn't who you are, but how honest you're being with the author. There's a line, not quite stated, but implied across almost everything he wrote, that stays with me. The man who cannot deceive himself is the most free. Not the most comfortable, not the most certain, the most free.